I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Sheriff Christopher is our keynote speaker. He was supposed to be here about 15 minutes ago. He's not here yet, so we're going to move the agenda around a little bit. If he's here in about 7-8 minutes, we'll get started. If not, we'll move our speakers around. I guess I'm supposed to tell you guys about Campaign for Liberty. You're going to work that thing, right? Okay. Campaign for Liberty is an organization devoted to liberty, educating people about it, providing for activism around it. Campaign for Liberty was organized after Ron Paul's first campaign in 2008 with the funds left over from his campaign. We have some very firm beliefs. We believe in individual liberty and constitutional government, sound money and free markets, and there's sound money backed, should be backed by gold, but it's not. Our mission is to promote and defend the great American principles of individual liberty, constitutional government, sound money, free markets, and a non-interventionist foreign policy by means of education and political activity. And that's what we're all about. So, and I think Sheriff Christopher is here. Do I see him in the back? There he is. All right. Well, looks like he just left. You guys scared him away. Is he coming back in? Is he ready to speak? Okay. Sheriff Christopher is a sheriff from Sussex County, Delaware. He actually began his law enforcement career, I believe, in Maryland, and I believe he is also from Harford County. If not, he knows it well. He'll fill you in on the details. He's here to talk to us tonight about the constitutional role of the sheriff and how vital that role is in standing between you and crime, not only the crime of your neighbors, but the crimes that government may commit against you. And he also will be talking about a battle that he's going toe-to-toe with in Delaware with Beau Biden. Apparently they're trying, not apparently, but they are trying to diminish the constitutional authorities that he has. So, and again, that just, that they're getting essentially between you and your protections that the Constitution provides for you. So, I don't see that he's come back in. Is he coming back in? All right, does anybody know a joke? Lowell usually tells jokes. I don't tell jokes. I'm not very good about it. Does anybody want to tell a joke? Do you know a joke, Bob? Anybody know a joke? I'm really not good at this, so... Yes?
How about instead you could read the article about the sheriff in the Maryland Constitution? It's very short.
Okay, sure. Bring it up and we'll see what it has to... I'll tell you, why don't you read it, Cindy?
Okay, I'll find it.
Oh, here he is.
Oh, good. You got it.
Sheriff? Huh?
Come on, we want to hear it.
All right. So with no more delay, here is Sheriff Jeffrey Christopher. Yay.
Just throw money.
That table is set up for you. Is that okay?
That's
where you're set.
Yep. Thank you. What an honor to be here in Harford County. I love this county. I used to work for the Natural Resources place here in Maryland, and proud to say that I'm a Marylander in the true heart and in the sense of the word, but I don't like crabs. I don't know, what's the birth defect, I think. Thank you for having me tonight. As she said, my name is Jeff Christopher, and I am the Sheriff of Sussex County, Delaware. After retiring from Maryland, I went down to a little place called Hickman, which is what, if you drive through Maryland to get to Delaware to go to the shore, you drive through Hickman. It's Route 16, just a little bit east of Denton. And if anybody comes to the beach, I'm sure you go right by my house or pretty close, so don't forget to blow your horn when you go by. My neighbors will love it. One of the things that I just want to touch on a few things. How long do I have tonight? All of them? 6.
You can talk until 20 or quarter of, and then that'll give us 10 or 15 minutes for questions and answers.
Oh, awesome. Okay. In the back, my son, the junior Marine there, he's setting up some things to put out there for you information-wise. We are hopefully we're trying to raise money for this battle, and what I'm going to do is just going to, if it's okay, I'm just going to speak frank to you and tell you what has happened in Delaware. When I became the sheriff there, I beat an incumbent that was there, a retired Delaware trooper, and he told a veterans group that he believed that common law and constitutional law was old, outdated law, not necessary for anyone to go forth with government. Needless to say, I was a little bit incensed by that. My dad was in the Special Forces in the Army and died from his wounds in World War II. Or after World War II, but suffered with his wounds. But I certainly have a sense. Is any veterans in the room tonight? God bless you guys. I wouldn't be able to stand up here and say, utter a grunt without you guys and what you did and your sacrifice, because what you guys do is you go there willingly and without question and do your job, and basically there's just nothing that I can do to thank you enough for what you do. So thank you. God bless you. Conservator of the peace. Article 15 of the Delaware Constitution says the sheriff shall be the conservator of the peace. Any lawyers in here? That's good. I was getting ready to get my taser out. In law, the word shall means you have no discretion whatsoever. On the way up here, Sheriff Mack called me and he said, are you to your speaking point? And I said, no, not yet. He said he had a couple of house cleaning things that he was trying to do and trying to get taken care of in Arizona. And he called me and said that he had just gotten off the phone with Joe Arpaio, and Joe said, go give him heck. And Joe, as you may know, broke his arm. He fell and broke his arm and dislocated his shoulder. And he reminded me that doesn't at all make me the best sheriff in America or America's sheriff, because he still is. He's 81 years old, bless his heart. Conservator of the peace is something that we all know without even defining that. I don't even really have to go into it. Most of you know exactly what it means. The more modern day term of that reflection is peace officer. In Delaware, it says a peace officer is synonymous with the word sheriff, and sheriff is a word basically that has description or describing one who is a conservator of that peace. And in doing so, the sheriff is responsible first and foremost to the sovereign. Everybody knows what that is, right? The people. Not talking about the state, not talking about the county. And unfortunately, over the last 24 or 25 years, I've been attacked by the county council there and the state of Delaware. And they have said that the term conservative of peace has never been defined in Delaware. The word sheriff has never been defined in Delaware. Can you imagine that? We've been here since 1669. Somebody missed the bus. If the sheriff in their thinking today is not a conservator of the peace, he's not a peace officer, then I would dare to say that every single veteran is lying in the graves in vain. Because we have built this country on the premise that we, the sovereign, basically elect those representatives to protect us, not only at the federal level, but at the county level as well. Now, conservators of the peace could also mean the President of the United States under the executive powers and the executive branch of government. You have that particular fruition of power. In the state level, you have the governor, who basically is in charge of the state police. But who do they work for? The state police. Who do they work for? The government. That's exactly right. They work for the government. Sometimes I have a chalkboard, but I usually, when I'm describing this, there's a line, if you could picture a horizontal line, and that line describes the people. Below the line describes the line of government and protection that we basically elect. And below that line is the people, the foundation of the entire system. Above it is the government. The government lends itself to the fact that we are the sovereign. We give it power. The line that divides the two is the electorate or representative government. Now they can stay on the line, they can side with the government, or they can side with the people. Which is more important? Siding with the people. Because when you side with the sovereign, you listen to the sovereign, you do the will of the sovereign, which is the people themselves. Remember, of the people, for the people, and by the people. We are a republic, folks, and we have forgotten that. For whatever reason, on the side of the people, we need to wake up together and say, no more. We're not going to take this tyranny anymore. The executive branch of government, of which the President of the United States, the governor of each state, of whom are elected, and it's been said to me by some liberal attorneys in Delaware that the county does not have a balance of powers. My response to him was, well, how in the world do they basically keep a check on and balances on each other? And he said, that was done away with. And I said, well, you need to tell me when that was done away with, because as far as I can see, there's still sovereign out here, there's still people out here that actually are in charge of the government. Well, he thinks that the government's in charge of the people, and basically tell the people what to do. Have you seen any evidence of that lately? Something called my cold dead fingers or something like that. In 1994, Sheriff Mack was approached by two federal agents in Arizona, Graham County, Arizona. And I've been there. I saw the exact spot where this all took place. And they walked into his office and they greeted and said, we're from the government, and you're going to have to uphold this new federal law in something called the Brady Bill. So you remember that? Well, Sarah lives in my county, his wife, and she gives me a fit just about every day about the Second Amendment. And of course, when I read the Second Amendment, it's pretty clear to me as to what it says, and the part that I like the most is where it says, shall not be infringed. Now you can bend that and twist that and turn that, color it upside down, put stripes on it, whatever way you want to do it, it doesn't matter, it still means shall not be infringed. And the idea of what we're seeing today in the government, they're bending the rules to suit themselves. We the people are the only entity that exists that can stop this. And we have to make sure. And we can march on Washington tomorrow and it's not going to do any good. They're not going to hear us. They're just going to reject us. What we need to do is hold those persons whom we elected at the county level totally 100% responsible for our will. And folks, this is a Christian nation. We may have different views about that, but we are still under God, one nation under God. We need to make sure that the liberties guaranteed. The Constitution doesn't give you those liberties. God does. The Constitution simply spells it out and tells you how to protect it. If we don't do that, we are going to lose it in a short period of time. I'm not talking about 5 years from now. I'm not talking about 3 years from now. Months away, because of what is going on in the head of Joe Biden, Beau Biden, even Mr. Boehner. They have forgotten where we come from in this country. And we need to make sure that they know that we're standing there to say no to whatever they try to do to manipulate those colors. And we've got to do this together. I've been challenging everywhere I go to speak. I've been challenging everyone to say, go to your neighbor, even if you don't talk to them, and explain to them, listen, this is a Christian nation. There's only one way we're going to hold on to this. Give them the information that you need. You guys hear all the time speakers telling you how to defend these kinds of things. There's all kinds of material available. The Institute on the Constitution, Campaign for Liberty. All of those wonderful, wonderful groups and this is Campaign for Liberty, all is it correct? You guys know what's going on. You guys are the industry, if you will, to bring back this country. You're on the front lines and you are the soldiers that are standing out there defending this country, and you guys pretty much are it. So we have to gird up our loins and go out there and fight hard. And I thank you for your service and what you're doing. But to go back in Arizona, the two feds basically told Mac that you're going to enforce this new Brady bill. And he said, what's it all about? And he basically, to put it in a nutshell, if you didn't pass the new tests, we simply will forbid you to have, carry, or wear firearms. And the right that you have or had as a family tradition and an American tradition would be removed from you if you wore a beard or a tattoo, certain clothing. This is what they tried to do. The Western state sheriffs were incensed by this, especially Sheriff Nixon, Montana, and Sheriff Mack. And they got together and they said, it's not going to happen. So Mack told them to get out of the county or he would arrest them as they were standing in his jail. And he tells it better. And he said years later he was at some funeral of a great man that passed away out there, and the federal agent walked up to him and he said, I really admire what you did, Mac, that day. He said, you had me scared. I don't know if you've ever seen Mac or not, but he's a pretty big fellow. And he said, basically, I thought you were going to pull a Buford Pusser on me and knock me in the head and carry me to some remote area in Arizona. But he told him, he said, I admire what you did. So even the feds that are under this pressure to force things upon us, they also know, because they have families too. A lot of them understand, they just don't know what to do. They have no idea what to do. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. But Max said no, and ended up we went through the court system, and in 1997, Justice Scalia of the United States Supreme Court, they heard the case, and he wrote the opinion. And you can look it up in reference, it's called Prince versus U.S. PRINTZ. And his words were very profound. The judge that actually heard the case and gave him mostly a constitutional rendering of what his case outlined, in so much as they went at this, remember it's about guns, they went at this about the Second Amendment. The attorneys turned it over, and the judge commended the attorneys for taking this position, because it ultimately ended up being about the 10th Amendment, which is states' rights. Now, in Delaware, I'm going to give you that link to that's actually what's happening in Delaware. Scalia wrote that there is no higher power in the county in America than the sheriff. And why is that? Because he's directly elected by the people, the sovereign, to protect them. He is the only elected law enforcement officer in the land. That's it. You must trust that electoral process to your will. If he's not doing what he's supposed to do, or he's doing something he's not supposed to do, sins of commission, sins of omission kind of thing, you, the people, are supposed to keep him in line and make sure he knows, or she knows, what your will is in the county itself. Now, in order to keep the peace, we have to be in line with Christian values. We cannot say that we are not a nation of Christians or Christian values and pretend to go forward and make it really work for the general populace, because I can tell you right now, the new generation, if you look at it, you can see the decay very quickly. So Scalia ruled and said that there's no higher power. That's a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. You look around, there's 2,014 precedent cases throughout the United States and in the various states at Supreme Court levels that says that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer. again, citing the electoral process that makes him that very person that responds directly to your will, and that is the people, the sovereign. Now, going back to what the attorney said to me in Delaware, if there is an attorney in Delaware, we have a distaste for attorneys everywhere, but if you come to Delaware, they actually, I want to say, give you the runs. These guys, when you talk about the Constitution, it's completely upside down in their heads. And why is that? Because they believe this thing called the sovereignty clause in the United States government. They think that they're sovereign over every other, and they're not. They're not at all. There's nothing in writing except for the supremacy clause that says as long as they abide by the Constitution. Well, then if you go to the Constitution, the 10th Amendment clears it up. Everybody knows about that, right? 10th Amendment? Well, that's what his case became. It was about the 10th Amendment and states' rights. Now, in Delaware, with the view that this judge just took last week, Judge T. Henley Graves, said, we are a nation of 50 nations, and I'm going to rule on Delaware law alone when it comes to the powers of the sheriff. And we knew already he had prepared our case with those 2014 precedent common law and case law statements that we read, 350 some pages of it. This judge looks at us and says, if there's none in Delaware, I'm going to rule that you're nothing, that you're nobody, that you have no power. Now, who's he really attacking here? The people. He is standing in the sheriff's lap to slap the people is what he's doing. The sheriff has submitted his power over the years to the county council. The county council decided everything that he's going to do, policy and procedure. Although, when I became a sheriff, there was no policies written as to how a deputy would conduct himself. That's amazing to me. Over the years, they point their finger at the sheriff and say, you're ultimately responsible for the liability of that office, but yet they create nothing for them. So there's nothing underpinning the idea that the county council is in charge of the sheriff's office. Now, the sheriff is not appointed. He's elected, just like every other place in the land. So how do you explain that a county administrator who's a bureaucrat and he's appointed by the county council who's elected is over the sheriff? Does it make sense? If he says, you're not going to do this, the county administrator, you're not going to do this. In fact, I had a county councilman walk up to me, and he's shorter than I am, so it makes me feel pretty good. I can look right down at him and kind of say, you talking to me? He looked up at me and he said, why do you disrespect your bosses like this? And I kind of looked at him and I said, can you define what you're trying to say? And I said, I'm not really sure what you're trying to say. I thought maybe that I disrespected a citizen somewhere, and I was really searching my banks for that. And he said, no. Now this guy's a Christian. He walks around, hands tracts out to people, and he says, if you would come to me, and I quote, on bended knee, hat in hand, you would get a lot more from me. Now that to me tells me what kind of man that I'm dealing with, what kind of system that I'm dealing with, because the others are just like him. They don't really care too much about the rights and the sovereignty of the citizens. They don't care. They're not concerned. I ask them questions like, how many burglaries do we have in Sussex County this past year? Oh, it wasn't much. Well, throw a number. Tell me what you think. Oh, well, a couple hundred. I said, how about 1,500? How about in areas where people never see a police car at all? No patrols, nothing. And the reason is because they, Sussex County, they're the only county in Delaware that contract the state police to be the county police. Now they're already paying state police taxes out of this pocket to cover. Then they want you to reach in their county pocket and take that out and pay for the same exact person. They say, well, it's the best bang for the buck. That's some of the cliches that they say. And I told them, I said, you've gotten away with this for about 20 years. I said, but when I get elected, you're not going to get away with it anymore. Well, who are you? You're nobody. You're a paper pusher is what they call me. Well, the sheriff brings in about $4.5 million in income, or revenue, if you will, to the county. And they tell me how much I'm allowed to spend on uniforms and vehicles and deputy salaries and what have you. And they pay me $20,000 a year to be the sheriff. So I asked them, why is the sheriff's salary so low? Well, they couldn't answer me. But one of the guys that works in the county, he said, what person in their right mind would ever come in here and try to change the sheriff back to what it used to be for $20,000 a year? And my wife asked me the same exact question. She knows I'm already crazy. The idea of a representative government, a republic if you will, has long since been abandoned in Delaware. That's how Joe Biden became the vice president. We have a very rich state, little, but very powerful. I bet that most of you who have a credit card here will send your bills to Wilmington, Delaware. And don't you think that that doesn't find the pockets of the very, very, very rich people in Newcastle County and the Bidens as well. We have power up there that basically says that this is the way it's going to be, and anything that comes into play that threatens that power, we're going to destroy them. And that's what I'm up against. Something just like that. Joe Biden himself looked at me and said, son, why do you want to cause all this negative attention to come to you? And I said, that's funny. I was going to ask you the same exact question. He said, I've heard of your wit. And I said, well, that's good, because I'm not backing down from you or anyone else who has been put into this power by yourself. As far as you're concerned, you've done it for yourself. I said, and I know my God will make sure that you do not trample the good people of this state and this country. And I believe all of you understand your role as patriots and fighters to make sure that people like him, who has completely lost the focus of people, he doesn't care. I've seen him at parties. I've seen him enter a room. His demeanor is not a people person. And I don't even talk mean about anyone, because that's not my nature as a Christian. But my mother said, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably Joe Biden. This fight has brought light to me in many different ways as to what I am to do. Of course, I pray daily about God leading me as to what I'm supposed to do about these challenges. They fired one of my deputies last year without my knowledge. I came into work and he'd already been handed his papers to dismiss him on some trumped up charge, which is what they're doing. They passed House Bill 325 last year, and they handed every member of the Senate and the committees a 64-page report citing that my deputies interfering with the state police operations. So I read all those, every single one of them. I interviewed my deputies and I talked to everyone, all the witnesses that were involved. Not one single story was true. Nothing. In fact, I'll give you one example. They said that we interfered with the state police drug investigation at the Motor Vehicle Administration right after an automobile accident. Well, the trooper that got on the scene had two Hispanic males. Neither could speak English, of course, especially when they see a red and blue bubble. They can't speak any English. They don't want to tell this trooper what's going on and what happened. So we get a phone call in the office. I happened to have the very deputy that I just described to you that was fired. And the same county councilman that looked up to me and said, why do you treat your bosses that way? He said, we don't need a Hispanic-speaking male in county employee. It's the truth. This deputy was called by that very trooper to respond to translate for him in this accident. He gets there, they find a wanted person in one of the other cars that was sitting beside the two involved in the accident. Our deputy recognized him to be a felony warrant out of family court. When we walked over to the vehicle, the gentleman threw a vial out of the vehicle and it landed on the ground. And of course, you know that's drugs. And my deputy picked it up and the trooper said, go ahead and stow that in evidence. He says, well, as you know, the state's taken away the sheriff's ability to write reports and stow evidence. So we can't do that anymore. He says, there's nothing I can do to help you. The trooper then, now
He's on the phone with me at the time. I'm listening to the background. The trooper then utters these words: "Throw it away and get rid of it." Now here's an individual who's a wanted felon with drugs in his possession, and they're telling him to throw the drugs away. Folks, these things are happening every day underneath of our noses. We don't hear about it because either we're not inquiring or they're not willing to tell. But this is what they attack me on, and then they judge my honor and the things that I'm trying to do for the people of Sussex County. So the one thing I learned real quick is they can't tell the truth and make me look bad, so they have to make it up to the tune of a 64-page report. Most of my deputies understand exactly what's going on because they're right smack in the middle of it. They know exactly what is going on with regard to these daily events. When, for instance, they called some 300 burglaries, they were involving elderly folks in the county. A place called Potnet's area, Millsboro. We had some 50,000 people in just one development. One development. They call the state police, and the state police say, well, is anybody injured? Is any doors damaged? Lock the doors. We'll send somebody tomorrow. This is the condition that's going on. But yet, that's the best bang for the buck. Now, of course, I'm not pitting myself against the state police and saying anything about that because I've always gone on the premise that first I have to fix the office of sheriff to make sure that the people have the confidence. And the one thing that I found out was that most people didn't even know we have a sheriff's office. And I question most people who say that, well, have you never seen do you know what a sheriff is? And of course they tell me, well, they're the police. I'm like, well, you're close. That's close, but if you go to Joe Biden, he'll say, or Beau Biden, sheriff has nothing to do with the police. He's not a police officer or not a law enforcement officer. Now, when they made House Bill 325, it was taken on, it was created and drafted by my own county council. And they passed it on to a Republican representative by the name of Danny Short. His father was a state trooper. He took it and tried to run it through with something called a quick law or fast-paced law. And a lot of times these representatives of ours, they tag it on the back of another law or they hide it somehow to get it through. We need to work on changing those things because how is that an open government? How are the people supposed to know what's going on, especially when it comes to our schools? And they tag on these things. What these liberal councils, if you will, want to teach our children, and I reject this trash that they're putting out in the form of books and magazines and mandates that our kids, they're making our kids at the second and third grade level read. And Delaware leads the charge, folks. If Joe Arpaio said it to me himself, he said, if there's a spear in the heart of America, he said it's going to run through the sheriff's body first, or the sheriff's office itself, and he said the tip of the spear is right in Sussex County, Delaware. Now, here's a guy who's been fighting Barack Obama and his legitimate birth certificate. Chokes me up when I start to lie like that. Told me, he said, I'm not trying to berate Mr. Obama. He says, in fact, I set out to prove him right, what he said. And I sent 14 investigators to Hawaii. He said they came back after 3 months, and he said, I simply could not find enough evidence to prove him right. He said, basically, the guy is not telling the truth. And of course, I know that shocked you. But our president was not born in America. And you ask yourself, how did we get in this situation? Well, we are in the tank. And that's what I mean, that we need to wake up and realize the challenges that we are going to face. It's going to take efforts of talking to your neighbors, paying for things that you never paid for before. Come away from your peace zone, the things that you're comfortable with. You're going to have to abandon some of those things in light of the fact that you need to fight. You guys are warriors. You are leading the charge. You're on the front lines. And there's not many of us, folks. There's a lot of people, because of the propaganda that's been spewed out there. And trust me, I know exactly what's happening in Delaware. They are telling kids today that they have to give gay a try. They have to. And before long, 3-4 years, that's going to be mandated too in our schools. Think about that, where we're going. Back to the sheriff. What can he do as an interposer? And what is an interposer? My good buddy Brad Rogers in Elkhart, Indiana, found himself on an Amish farm just north of Elkhart. And I talked to him not long ago out in Arizona as he was there with me. And he said, Jeff, he said, I'm just a little guy. I'm just a little guy trying to do a job. And he says, all of a sudden, I had these federal people standing on my doorstep telling me that they're going to take this guy's farm away. Well, the first question I asked was, well, what's the problem? Well, basically, they were taking it away because he was making raw cheese and raw milk and selling it. Well, he had a co-op. Everybody know what a co-op is? Yeah, you pay $20 a week or whatever, and you get a gallon or two of milk or whatever. It's a share. And this just really didn't sit well with these feds. They wanted to come in here and shut this guy down. Well, they started to seize his cows and they started to seize his farm. And this guy had been there almost 300 years as an Amish farmer. Now, I don't know if you know any Amish. We're pretty close to Amish country here. They're plain and simple, and they're straight out truthful for the most part, and they'll tell you what's on their heart and their mind. And he told Brad, he said, in tears, he said, I don't know what to do. They're going to take away my family. These people are supposed to be representatives. Now, he couldn't get over the fact that their representatives were telling them to take, because he went to some of the local reps in Evansville, and or in Elkhart, and he said, they didn't listen to me. I can't figure out why they didn't listen to me. They didn't have time. He said, one guy shook my hand and said, that's nice, and walked on. And he was basically lost. He didn't know what to do. So he went to his sheriff, and that was Brad Rogers. And Brad Rogers showed up and he said to the federal agents that were standing there taking inventory to levy the animals, he said, you got 3 minutes to get off the farm. Yeah. And Brad's also shorter than me. Not many that's shorter than me. He said, Jeff, I was scared to death. I was shaking. He said, I didn't know if I had to pull my pistol, what these guys were going to do. He said, I had no idea. He said, there was 20 or so of them. And he said, I just put my hand on my pistol. And he said, I am the sheriff of this county. If you don't take me serious, you're going to find your way via the hospital first off of this land. It's up to you. That is interposition. That is standing. The sheriff standing on behalf of the people because you put that guy there. So if you're a sheriff and Hartford County doesn't understand, I think he does. I'm not sure. I haven't actually talked to him personally. I was at the Maryland Sheriff's Association meeting, and the one that basically pushed me down as being insignificant was Sheriff Mike Lewis from my own neck of the woods in Wycomico County. He seems to think that the Delaware State Police have the full and total charge. And I said, do you realize what you're saying? I said, these are a state entity. They are a corporation. They work for the government. They don't work for the police. They don't answer to the people at all. They can tell you, and that's why a lot of times you get the attitudes that you get from them, because they know they don't answer to you. Their job is to raise revenue for the state and enforce these ridiculous laws that we have. So, who answers? The sheriff. He answers directly to you. And if he doesn't know that, you guys should be knocking on his door and standing there in line. I'm next, and the 50 behind you want to talk to the sheriff that day, and you'll have to just clear his schedule. He works for you. You put him in the office, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He answers directly to you. Don't let him tell you any different. If he doesn't want to understand, then you put up a candidate that will. Because I guarantee you, if we don't make these strong measures, these strong, outgoing, forceful types of decisions, we're going to lose. And what are we going to say to our children, our grandchildren? What are we going to tell them about the legacy that we left? We can look back, most of us, and say, I've had a good career, I've saved a lot of money, I worked for 20, 25 years, some of you more, and you worked your fingers to your bone, and that's great, but it's all going to be gone and taken away in the next 3 to 5 years if we don't stand and fight. Fight with the God-given ideas that He gives you. Fight with your might, with your eyes, your ears, your mouth, with your pocketbook. Fight with everything that you have, because listen, we don't look at it. There's a lot of tea parties and different people around the country. I've been to Idaho, California. They don't seem to get or grasp the seriousness of what we're facing. They're going to continue to push these. Listen, you heard the Second Amendment mandates from the federal government. They backed off it. Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein, they're going to come right back at us again. They're going to come at us again. Where are we going to be? We're going to give up? No. We're going to stand firm? Yes. We have to trust our sheriff. We have to make our sheriff understand. And if he's not going to, is there recall in there? No. Recall? No recall. There's not. That's good. Listen, you go make it happen. Are we in trying times? Yes. Right? Can you make some kind of a problem for the government that's not listening? You darn tootin' you can, because you are the people that put them in. So I want to thank you for the time that you've given me and for letting me tell you a little bit of the story. I wish I had a little more time to tell you. I would tell you some other things that are going on across the country. Sheriff Mack has set up a page. I would encourage all of you to please join. It's called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. That's CSPOA for short, .org. If you go on there, you'll see something called the SOS. And my wife made this for me. And it stands for Save Our or Support Our Sheriff. And what it does is it tells you the story, a little bit about Delaware. It tells you what's been going on and what options they're offering me. And it's not much. And it's coming to a state near you. I can guarantee you, if they get away with it here, the Bidens and the rest of those people that don't care about your sovereignty through the office of sheriff in each county and this country, they've already tried it in California. They're trying to push it on the land situation, the trees. And they're going to try to take away. Now, keep in mind, folks, I'm not talking about just certain issues. They took the power of arrest from the sheriff in Delaware away by state law. So now I'm forced to obey the Constitution or get arrested for violating the state law. So what would you do? Well, they know that's where I'm going to be. I'm standing on the Constitution because I know it's firm, and that's what we have to do, and make sure that that line is drawn in the sand. Stand your ground, protect your Second Amendment rights, your first, because that's the next thing is your First Amendment. You can't have a first without a Second Amendment. You know that. So stand your ground and make sure that you're not abused by these people in this government that's trying to mandate your rights away, your liberties away. So I have a few things at the back table if you'd like to come back. Sheriff Mack has a couple things that he sent me to sell to raise money. And we are raising money and taking donations for tonight. They're strictly to the attorneys. Guess where I had to go to get my attorneys? Maryland. There wasn't one attorney in Delaware that would fight Joe Biden, with these names. So I had to come to Maryland. You know how friends work. In Baltimore City, a friend of mine has been a lifelong friend. I've known him since birth, and we pretty much think just alike. And I had him get a buddy, and of course, he backed out because we weren't catching up with the payments, and which tells you where his heart is. I said, is there anything you can do to help me? And he said, nope, no money, no service. And I said, I understand. So I prayed and I asked God to send me somebody, and he sent me a woman attorney. And she is a scrapper. And that's what I'm going to bet. The next move is from Superior Court to Supreme Court, and we're going to go after them right into Delaware. So hopefully with everyone's support around it. And let me also reiterate as I'll close. April 6th, if you can come down to Georgetown, Delaware, come down and spend the day and go out and eat. We're having the Institute on the Constitution. It's the definition of the sheriff, the role of the sheriff. Sheriff Mack's going to be there. Joe was going to be there, Joe Arpaio, but he broke his arm and he's not able to come. So please come down and enjoy yourself. Listen to Mike Peruta. Some of you may know Mike. Mike's going to come down. He, by the way, has been behind us 100%, and Sheriff Mack also. So if you would support everything, every effort to empower your sheriff and empower your own group. And don't forget, folks, I hate asking anybody for money because I know it's hard work and earned. But it's going to take that kind of sense and understanding to fight this thing, because whose money do they have? So we're paying them to destroy us, and we have to stand that ground. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Make sure you are the Jeff, what is it, and Christopher of the Sheriff and Citizen Summit, which you just talked about. I want you to know too that they're going to have training to teach you how to form a posse, okay? I made up flyers, they're out there on the table, help yourself. The event is free. The only problem I see people having a problem is going there. It's early in the morning, it's in Delaware, and the Institute on the Constitution was talking about bringing the bus, which nobody did. It would make it easier for everybody, okay? This is a free event, and the sheriffs, from what I've seen on the computer, the sheriffs are only going to back you when the time comes that you back them now. You need to show them they have your support. You need to get out there and back your sheriff and find out which sheriff is going to help us. Because if they're not, when they send those flyers out to your house like they did to me, when you donate to the sheriff, I will not, because he's not backing us. So you need
Let them know that too.
Yeah,
Let them know.
absolutely.
We started out with 92 sheriffs in the CSPOA, and now we have upwards of 475, I think, across the country. $3,077 across the land. And the most recent battle we had was in Colorado. The legislators threatened to take their pay away if they stood against the Second Amendment attacks. And the sheriff said, well, I guess we'll just have to be without pay or whatever you're going to do. He says, if you take it away, we're just going to gear up our loins and just stand here with our guns, and you'll have to come and try it, see what it's going to do. And they backed down. So thank you. Thank you.
10 minutes worth of questions.
Okay.
Sheriff Christopher, thank you. I assume you've read the Maryland Constitution, the article that describes the sheriff.
Yes.
Which it does not describe anything. And I don't know if you know Edwin Vieira, who teaches on the militia. And I think a point he makes in his teachings is that these things were not defined. He said conservator of the peace,
Correct.
and then sheriff and militia. Things like that weren't defined when our various constitutions were written because it was completely known by the people. And yet what people, lawmakers and the public and judges have come to believe law is if it is written down in a piece of paper or a judge makes an opinion so there can be a precedent trail. And I must say that so far I haven't seen or heard any of you, and I'm longing that you will do it. Sheriff Mack, I was with IOTC for a year and a half. They haven't done it there. To articulate what that role is, and it sounds like you're going to do it on April 6th, but, in a way, it's understandable since they departed from these concepts that then only puts this as a limitation, not as a job description.
Correct.
So help.
In the form of posse comitatus, anybody not know what that means? Everybody, posse comitatus is the word posse. You see that. You can think back to the old westerns and get a pretty good idea as to what it is. The sheriff directs you. He doesn't simply ask you. You are under the full direction of the sheriff in times when a militia is needed. And when we're talking about posse comitatus, it is a militia at the county level. The sheriff has the authority to bring forth grand juries, to indict those persons in government that you've entrusted that basically deny you of your rights or defy you of your constitutional liberties. Can anybody think of anybody in Maryland that's doing that? The sheriff is supposed to be untied from that. He's supposed to be tied to you with that. If you go to him and say, so-and-so has done this to me and violated my constitutional right, he is supposed to be your interposition agent. So he has the right to bring a grand jury against those people. The question is, will he do that? Now, they're forcing me and pushing me to a point where I'm going to do it, and I've already put it out there. If Mr. Biden wants to come to Sussex County, he may get arrested. That's a scary thought because I know he has his entourage or whatever, but I serve a mighty God, so he might open that situation up. But posse comitatus in the sense is something under the direction of the sheriff in the way of a militia at the county level. Where does everybody live? in the county. You live in the county first before you live in the state, right? So where the founding fathers recognized that the power of the county is in the power of the people. So you have those officials first directed towards your service, especially the sheriff. Remember, the sheriff is the only one in the county under the executive branch of law enforcement that is answerable to you alone. He has to fall in line with certain government things, but he can certainly set the precedent in his county as to what's going to be enforced, which is what Colorado situation, the state officials out there said they don't have to follow federal mandates. And boy, to the dismay of so many liberals out there, what do you mean he doesn't have to follow mandates? This is the law. Not according to us. And where were those decisions made? At the county level. And that's why they encourage the sheriff to turn around and look and saw all the people behind him. And that's, again, you have to encourage your sheriff. If he's not going to do it, then get somebody else. It's that simple. So you have an opportunity to put someone in there that's going to protect you and defend your rights. So that posse comitatus is the power of the people. And I can tell you right now that that's all. If you look this up, go home and look this up, you will see that it always refers to under the direction of the sheriff. And why is that? And remember, he answers directly to you, the people, the sovereign in the county. And when that sheriff can move forward on those issues and protect you with those things, he has to stand between. I've heard it said recently that a sheriff can't interpret the Constitution. Well, how can you obey the Constitution or disobey the Constitution if you can't interpret it as to what its meaning is? Right? So for them to say, this is a liberal point of view, for them to say that a sheriff, once he knows his oath, he puts his hand on the Bible and he swears before God Almighty, who gives him his power and authority. And of course, a lot of sheriffs have forgotten that, unfortunately. And that's the problem. And the question is, will he do this? So we have to make sure we push this. As they go through, I'm using the peaceable avenue right now, but it may be pushed to another level. And I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So, but I'm not going to give it up. I'm going to stand on the Constitution to make sure that people win this. Yes, sir.
Our right to bear arms is being infringed right and left, up and down. Do we go to our sheriff and say, I would like the permit to carry a concealed weapon?
Does he issue it here in Hartford? State police? Well, there's a couple different things that you can do. And of course, a lot of people do things under great pressure, and more pressure causes people to do different things. But what I would do is I would make sure, as a group, what you should do, because the more eyes that are watching them, the less likely they are to infringe. You have to have witnesses. That's the one thing that they count on. If you're the lone soldier going out there trying to do what you need to do to benefit yourself in the way of your constitutional rights and as you understand it, this is why they back down. Because all the gun owners in America, which we outnumber them, I think it's 150,000 to 1. So think about that, folks. When the poo-poo hits the proverbial fan, you're going to have an army against these people. These guys swell up. My daughter said, why does the hand swell up when you put your hand in there and try to get an egg? I said, she's trying to scare you to make herself look a whole lot bigger than what she really is. That way, and then she growls to make you intimidated. That's exactly what they're doing, folks. There's not too many of them. We outnumber them. So stand your ground and go to your sheriff and say, this is my right to have a carry, conceal, whatever you want to do. Now, Maryland is not open carry. Delaware is. So I don't have much of a trouble over there with people because they just carry it on the outside. Does it cause disruptions? Yeah, but it's their right. They want to carry it. And shall not be infringed is something. I'm waiting for a good case to come through. It hasn't yet, which is really surprising to me that they've really, a national a situation or a spotlight where somebody says that they've been denied to carry.
That could happen that the county could go against the state?
Well, see, as I was explaining before, it was always about feds interfering with the state, 10th Amendment. In my case, it's my own state that has basically crossed and violated their own constitution. What do you do then? because it's really not federal jurisdiction. You have to find a way to reach it or link it to the federal government as to what the legislators have done. They created that House Bill 325 that says sheriff has no authority, no power whatsoever. So if the people come to me, in essence, by what they claim, I don't have any authority or power to do anything. The powers of arrest are gone, as according to the state legislature. And that's why I said, if it comes to, and all my deputies have been instructed that if they see something happen in their presence, go ahead and arrest them. Go ahead and arrest who you need to keep the peace. So, yes, sir.
Isn't your state constitution the supreme law of the state?
Yes.
Doesn't your constitution say that you are a law-abiding officer?
She mentioned earlier that the Maryland Constitution doesn't describe the sheriff here in so much as enumerating it exactly what it is. Well, in Delaware, it's probably one of the strongest in the United States. It says that he shall be the conservator of the peace. Title 11 in Delaware law, which describes the powers of the Delaware State Police, says exactly the same thing. The state police shall be the conservators of the peace. Now, up until 2007, it said this: and they shall have police power like the sheriff, constables, and other police officers. And then it goes on to describe what a conservator of the peace is, what he does, protects life and property. Now, this is what the attorneys, and this is what this judge at Superior Court said. It doesn't mean, conservative of the peace doesn't mean police officer, doesn't mean peace officer. See, that's how they could get out of it. They said it doesn't mean that.
So is doesn't mean is.
It depends on what you mean by is. And conservative of the peace, who knows what conservative of the peace acronym is? COP. Wow. It's amazing, isn't it? Did you tell that in Delaware? Oh, no, that's not what it meant. Now, keep in mind, the state police were created in Delaware in 1935. The sheriff came in 1669. That's 300 years. So, who policed the county before the state police came along? Well, according to them, I guess there was no police, there was no authority whatsoever. It's just all of a sudden there was a state police. The state police are not the end-all, to-do-all, except in Delaware. They have such a powerful, most of those guys are retiring and go into the Senate or into the House of Representatives or some relatives of theirs, and they stand firm on trying to protect their sovereignty. And this is why Joe said the heart of the spear is in Delaware, because he knew how powerful the state police are in Delaware. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if they continue to go and they answer to the government and you eliminate the sheriffs, you have a police state. And that's the problem that we're facing. So,
State police equals police state. We have one more question.
Sheriff, I'm curious about your perspective and your perception of the Department of Homeland Security's purpose and acquisition of 3 billion politics going forward and the militarizing of local police departments.
I'm suspicious on the Homeland Security part. This is just another government entity that was created to basically employ more people to cost the taxpayers more money. To address the specific thing about the ammo, they're trying to buy it all up so that we can't get it. Because if you have a weapon in your house, and they knew that this came on rather sudden, the people that are looking to arm themselves are going to run out of ammo. Listen, they've got plenty of time. They can just project it and say, well, these guys have shot up this much ammo and that much ammo. They have scientists that work for them and say, well, over here in this sector of America, we have probably the strongest in the way of militia, and they're going to gird up their loins, if you will, again, to those particular areas, such as Michigan and Montana, out in those areas. But as far as Delaware and Maryland, I think the latest figure in Delaware, there was only 25, maybe 28% of the people in Delaware actually own guns. So think about that. When they look at this, it's all figures, and they'll say, well, if they run out of ammo, then we've got them. So it's all about protecting our sovereignty.
Do you suspect that could fit into a martial law scenario?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think they will waste no time in doing that. Now, guess who's going to enforce that martial law? The state police. And shame on the sheriff if he does it. Shame on him or her. So that's why we're trying to work tirelessly to get the sheriffs online and make them understand. A lot of it's education and awareness, because they don't know. I met a whole bunch of them in Virginia that had no idea what the word interposition was. That's basically blocking this mandated law that takes away your right as a citizen in your county. And he needs to stand up there, much like Brad Rogers did. So, but as far as the NDAA and the Homeland Security, I'm suspicious of. I was a chief of police here in Maryland for, I guess, about 8 years. And when they started coming down, that's when I first started realizing the Cops More, Cops Fast grant. It came out in, I'm guessing it was probably the latter part of the early 90s, late 90s. I was real suspicious of that because of the way they were doing it. They were asking certain questions that makes the red flags fly. And basically I came out of that and went into this other position that made me realize what I'm doing to the people. So, thank you. I have a limited supply of the little book that talks about the Mac case back there, and I've got some of Mac's books. I wished he would have signed them for me, but if you bring them to April 6th, if you buy any, they're $10. If you buy any, bring them, then I'll make sure you get them signed. It's no problem. We have some lanyards, and we have some other little booklets out there, so please come back and visit. Thank you. God bless you.
Those are mine. They might be. We'll see. Okay, this is the time in our agenda where we have donations. Campaign for Liberty is a volunteer organization, and all the folks here, the speakers come, the folks that set up the agenda, we all do this for the love of liberty, not for the love of money. So we've got a couple people going around with donation buckets. That helps us pay for the room, helps us pay for mailings, helps us pay for postcard activisms, the robocalls that you guys get, which I know you love to get. So please be generous, and also please stop back and take a look at Sheriff Christopher's table. He's got some great stuff there too. Another thing we also do is, how does this work where, who here came here for the first time? How does this work? Did somebody bring you or ask you to come? Who has tickets? Did anybody get a ticket when they came in? Okay, so what we do is you can see I haven't done this very often. What we do is we pick a couple tickets, and then you get this lovely Campaign for Liberty t-shirt if your ticket comes up, okay? I've got two. I think there's a large and a medium. So who has 443-6168? 443-6168. I got it. Yay! And who has 443-6159? 443-6159. Anybody here? Should I pull another one? 443-6163. We've got one more t-shirt to give away, folks. 443-6163. All right. Okay.
159.
Nope. Let's see. Yep, I did. Do you want it?
That's it.
Okay. All right. You guys can collect your t-shirts anytime. And now we have an open mic. We've got 4 folks that are scheduled for open mic. The first one is Pat Colbert, and then on the deck is Betty LeBron. Guys, please remember, open mic is 2 to 3 minutes per person. If we go over that, then the folks behind you don't get a chance to talk. So, are you Pat Colbert?
No, I am, but I don't need to talk because I wanted to tell you about what's happening.
All right. Then Betty LeBron, you're up, hon.
Nobody did, and I got flyers, that's not right about it.
Hi. I was busy going to, and I'll say this real quickly. I'm going to tell you about when I went to Annapolis to testify. But I heard on the news, people are demonstrating. This is a critical, everybody please listen. This is critical. The so-called same-sex marriage that the Supreme Court is hearing, God really laid it on my heart. I'm also a born-again believer. This thing could destroy this country. They're saying it's civil rights. That's bulldoggy. It's not civil rights. He said we should be able to love whomever we want. If you stop and think what I'm not going to get too explicit, two male homosexuals do to one another is the most disgusting, filthy thing I can possibly think of. Sex, the way God created it, is a beautiful and wonderful thing, but not between the same two people of the same sex. It's absolutely disgusting, and they want to ring it up the flagpole and make us salute us. Never. Those of us in the mainline churches and synagogues, never. The conservative and Orthodox Jews are totally against it, and most Christians. So all I can say is pray. Please pray. Pray. 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people, which are called by my name, etc. Pray that God will deliver us from this abomination. If there be curses on this country, I promise you, it will destroy this country. But gotta pray that that Supreme Court is not going to allow. They should send it back to California and say, you take care of that yourself in California. Okay? Please pray that we'll be delivered from this abomination. Thank you. Hallelujah. Another thing, I'll make this real quick. I did go to Annapolis 5 times, signed up to testify 4 times, got to testify 2 times, got to speak to an outdoor rally on January 19th. That was awesome. For our Second Amendment rights, it's not about gun control, it's about people control. They want to infringe on our rights, and here's a quote of Patrick Henry. I'm going to give Sheriff Christopher. I put this in their faces when I testified on March the 1st about it's in our C4L pocket Constitution, what Patrick Henry said the Constitution is. I also gave another quote, for the first time, a civilized nation will have full gun registration. Our streets will be safer, unquote. Who said that?
Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler. 1935, in front of the Reichstag, and it's incrementalism. They want to take it away one step at a time. And so like I said, I testified, and I hear O'Malley's gun grabbing bill is in trouble because reader people rose up. Over 1,300 signed up to testify against it. 32 signed to testify for it.
I just wanted to let everybody know that I have made copies of Nullification, the Rightful Remedy. It's a video by the 10th Amendment Center. Tom Woods is in it. I'm not sure if Sheriff Richard Mack is in it, but it's all about the concept of nullification, which is essentially what Sheriff Christopher was speaking about, is the sheriff nullifying unconstitutional federal laws. They're back there at the desk. If you guys want them, help yourself. They're free. I made probably between 50 and 75 copies. All right?
Is there Nick Barnes here signed up to speak? Do you want to go while it comes up?
Hello, I'm Joe Fleckenstein, and about a week and a half ago we had a pro-Second Amendment rally in Aberdeen. How many people were there for that? All right, very good, very good. We had about 250 people there all together. Our main reason for being there, besides supporting our Second Amendment, was to encourage Delegate Mary Delaney James to vote against O'Malley's gun grab, which is House Bill 294. Okay, so our politicians are very shady, most of them are anyway, especially the liberal ones, and I got a response. I wrote to Mary Delaney James a couple days ago to ask her, so are you going to vote against HB 294? Okay, she writes back and says, Joe, thank you for the email concerning my vote on HB 294, the Firearms Safety Act of 2013. I will be voting against any legislation that violates any constitutional right of any American citizen, as I always have. Okay, so that's pretty vague. And so I went back to her, I said, can you please clarify your position? That really doesn't say, I was friendly about it, I said, that doesn't really say much. So I asked her, does that mean that you will vote against taking away our semi-automatic weapons? Will you vote against restricting our magazines and our ammo? So I've yet to hear from her. Hopefully she'll respond tomorrow. But it just proves, I mean, these people are there, they're our representatives. They're there to be honest with us, to tell us what they want, to tell us how they're going to vote. And It's stuff like this, round and round. So I'm going to pass out a paper to everyone with her phone number and her email, and take 2 or 3 minutes tomorrow or Thursday to call her, to email her, and just to get clarification from her, like, what is she going to do? It's just so ridiculous to have these elected officials that go round and round with doublespeak. So please, I'm going to pass it out in a second. I'll pass this mic back to Vicki. But please take a moment tomorrow or Thursday to call or email her office just to get some clarification. We do not want her to vote for House Bill 294. Thank you very much.
Is Nick Barnes here? Nick Barnes is signed up to speak. Here comes Mr. Barnes.
That was a short list.
Let's see, do I have the right place for this?
There you go.
All right, I was one of those 1,300 people that signed up March 1st to go down and speak against House Bill 294. They started taking non-expert testimony at 4 and then interspersed it with reading some other bills in the meantime, waiting and just having a glorious time. Anyway, I tried to visit Delegate Glass. He actually invited me down, and his chief of staff got me signed up, so I was signed up as number 109 to testify. I finally, they were seating panels of 4. I was down there. Panel I was on finally got seated about 7:30 p.m. And I understand it only went to 3:45 a.m. the next morning because some people that signed up did go home. After I also tried to see Delegate Delaney James, but she was off somewhere, and I talked to her chief of staff and tried to get an idea. I left my position written, gave him a copy. This is it. This is what I think of this, and okay, so she's got some piece of paper from me at least. She knows who I am. She doesn't always like to return my emails, but I think she's fairly nice. Anyway, I talked about what I presented was since I'm a parent, a lot of people are concerned about what happened, the tragedy in Sandy Hook Elementary. And this seems to be the cause celeb to let's get these bill out here and let's get guns, so that everybody can be safe. So we won't have images of little children on the floor. And I tried to explain, so I'm concerned about this, but when I read the bill, and has anyone here actually read House Bill 294? I read most of it. Like, God, where are the grammar teachers? The first sentence goes, and I'm going to resist you.
I'm sorry, we can't, because we've got some speakers behind us.
They held me to 1 minute there, and I couldn't get out half of what I wanted to say. I told them, yes, you've been hearing that this infringes the Second Amendment, but guess what? Down here on page 28, 30, it infringes the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. So they're hitting 3 at once with this thing. Now, after I was done, there was one delegate, and I can't remember the lady's name, said, when they asked the delegates have questions of the panel, she said, well, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Now, I've been sitting here and I've been listening, and I'm going to quote her as much as I can, but I'll give you the gist. We had listening people have come up over and over and said that if this bill passes and becomes law, they will become criminals. That we're going to come and take the guns. And that's just not how it's going to be. So, well, excuse me, but I did read it. And down there, page 28, 32, there are provisions for the police to come in, search your house, and take your guns and arrest you if necessary. It's in there. But wants to say that, no, it's not. And then the thing that really made my blood boil, we don't even know what this bill looks like. We don't know what it's going to be. So you can't say all this. It's not in there, but we don't know what it is in there, and we don't know yet. So thanks for coming down and wasting your time, people.
Mr. Bournes, you need to come back next week and finish the rest of your story, because we want to hear it. It sounds like it was a good one. Now we're speaking of guns. Jeremy is going to update us on the gun control issues, where things are going with the states and the Fed, or states and Fed. So, Jeremy, okay.
Okay, 2 months ago, I informed you guys with what was going on a federal and state level with the gun control after the Sandy Hook stuff. Basically, right now on the federal level, Dianne Feinstein's assault weapons ban has been pulled by Senator Majority Leader Reid because it would only get 40 of the 60 needed votes needed to break a Republican filibuster. Senator Reid is planning on introducing a bill with no assault weapon ban. However, it will include a universal background check and possibly allow amendments for magazine capacity limit and assault weapons bans. Reid's bill will just be another piece of feel-good legislation because obviously the criminals aren't going to participate in a background check to get their guns. Also, I spoke about the sheriffs, and back in January, about 70 sheriffs at the time had signed on saying that they wouldn't enforce Obama's gun control, and now it's up to about 340 as of last week. Okay, on the state level, on February 28th, the state Senate passed O'Malley's gun control bill, SB 281, with a vote of 28 to 19. All 12 Senate Republicans voted against it. SB 281 is now being held up in the House Judiciary and Health and Government Operations Committees. With a 2/3 vote in the House, the bill can be pulled from committee and directly voted on. The bill includes an assault weapons ban as well as licensing and fingerprinting to buy a handgun. And in order to do that, they're probably going to have to make another Maryland State Police Department. And I just finally got my handgun that I purchased on January 30th. It took 43 days, and it should only take 7 days. So that's due to the influx of the people filling out paperwork for regulated arms in Maryland. So if it's taken that long just to get a regulated arm, it's going to take even longer if everybody has to apply for a license and fingerprinting. Not to mention all that's unconstitutional. And then once again, this bill is also a feel-good piece of legislation because the criminals aren't going to get fingerprinted, they aren't going to get licensed. And most likely this bill will be held until one of the last days of session and forced through while we're all asleep thinking that the bill already got shot down, or, keeping our eyes on different bills that might pass. And then real quick, Joe touched on the rally, and these are some of the pictures from the rally we had in Aberdeen on March 16th, but there's also a rally up in Rising Sun in Cecil County the previous week on March 9th, and they had, I think, about 500 people show up there to influence Delegate Rudolph to vote against HB 294 and SB 281, and it was a success because he caved in and voted against the bill. And then ours, Mary Delaney James is on the borderline. We've gotten multiple answers from her office on the issue of, I support the Second Amendment, but think we need more control on who gets guns, which is a slippery slope. And then what Joe got saying that she supports the Constitution and won't take away constitutional rights of any citizen. So she's back and forth, so make sure you guys call her and keep the pressure on her, because we can probably get her to cave in. Okay, any questions?
I heard that this week or last week that
somehow the stay was put on the concealed carry.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Something bad happened. What's the details?
I think what happened was the court overturned it and said that the other judge's ruling was wrong, so now they might be appealing it to the Supreme Court, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
All right, and I think this guy has a video. Can somebody, we have a video that we're showing before Scott speaks to us about non-negotiable rights. I think you're really going to like it. While Jeremy's going to set it up, will somebody back there, you'll be able to take care of that? Okay, great.
How many more innocent people?
How many more? How many more? What has been the number one cause of unnatural death in history?
Democide, or death by government, has killed 290 million people on record.
Look it up. Go look it up. In the 20th century, government murdered 4 times as many people as were killed in all the international and domestic wars combined. USSR, 61,911,000 people killed. Hitler's Germany, nearly 21 million people killed.
Japan's imperialism, nearly 6 million people killed.
Western colonization killed over 50 million people. Pol Pot's Cambodia, funded by the U.S. government, 2 million people killed.
China's Communist Party, as many as 76 million people killed between 1949 and 1987.
And the list goes on and on. Demand to know why the Department of Homeland Security bought more than 1.6 billion hollow point bullets.
How many more people does government have to kill?
Enough. Enough.
Demand an end to citizen disarmament.
As an American. As an American citizen.
As a patriot.
For your children.
Enough of the people laying down and letting government kill them in mass after disarming them, as they've done throughout history over and over again. Now is the time. It's time.
It's time to realize that when the government takes your guns, people die.
It's time to realize the biggest threat to you and your family is government.
It's time to recognize government is the greatest killer of all time.
Demand they show you the word hunting in the Second Amendment.
Demand our politicians uphold the Constitution and Bill of Rights as they swore to when they took office.
It's time for our leaders to read the Constitution.
It's time for our leaders to obey the Constitution.
The Constitution.
The Constitution.
Because a well-regulated militia with 10-round magazines wouldn't last very long.
So now you know the most dangerous thing to you and your family in the world is government.
Because mass murderers agree. Gun control works.
I was going to say, support your local sheriff, because we're going to count on the sheriff to support us when the time comes. Before I get started, I just wanted to kind of say one thing real quick. If I would have told you in 1985 that you would witness the fall of the Soviet Empire in 1989 and the total dismantling of the Soviet Empire, you probably would have said, what? You're crazy, right? If I would have told you in 2006 that by 2009 the United States would elect a socialist president and we would socialize the major car companies, GMAC, Chrysler, the banks, we'd have socialized health care and witnessed more destruction of our liberty than we've ever witnessed in the last 100 years, you would probably have said that I was crazy. So what I'm going to tell you is just, fasten your seatbelts, because I got, some things here that I think are going to be interesting to you. The Bill of Rights are not negotiable. There's a destructive and delusional pattern that is spreading like a virus among misguided Americans, and it pushes the idea that government can pick and choose which rights codified in the Bill of Rights that it wishes to recognize or discard on any given day. This delusion is predicated on the concept that if a popular majority can be emotionally whipped into a frenzy over one particular right, then that right can simply be discarded and stricken from the Bill of Rights. But no such power exists to discard any portion of the Bill of Rights, at least not without proper ratification of 3/4 of 50 states. And that's not even really true. I'll talk about that in a minute. But no such power is solely found in the federal government. There is no such power placed solely in the executive branch, nor in Congress, nor in the White House. Individual liberties that are described in the Bill of Rights cannot be infringed, nor deleted, nor overridden by popular opinion, not even loudly screamed popular opinion. America is not a nation that is ruled by tyranny or by the mob. It isn't even a democracy. It is a republic, where certain unalienable rights describe the protection of each individual, even if that individual is a lone voice of sanity among a majority gone mad. The Bill of Rights protects individuals from the tyranny of mob rule, a phenomenon that routinely rears its head in any society where historical illiteracy is rampant and the people are lulled into a state of complacency by charismatic and dishonest leaders. The right to keep and bear arms, much like the right to free speech, is not negotiable. Its protections are not subject to the whims of majority opinion nor the screaming demands of hyperventilating media personalities. The social media trolls and the opinion writers of the world can comment all they want on the Second Amendment, yet the individual right to keep and bear arms remains immutable. Just like the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is non-negotiable. No governor, senator, or president has the power whatsoever to banish the Second Amendment. And any attempt to oppose it only brands themselves as criminal traitors to the United States of America. Many who consider themselves to be conservatives and constitutionalists will say any active effort to eradicate the Second Amendment outside of law without going through the proper process of state ratification for constitutional amendments is by definition an act of sedition against the United States of America and its people. Well, I would submit to you that they have the second half correct. It is an act of sedition, but it is also a rebellion against God. For rights that are secured in the Bill of Rights are inalienable, meaning that they are gifts from God, and as such, they cannot be given up through an amendment process, even if we wish to do so. A gift of God cannot be repudiated. An imbalance of power in the hands of government inevitably leads to mass violence waged against the people. Those who are currently screaming for the population to be disarmed do not realize that they are seeking to prevent in one kind of violence that they are unleashing a far more disastrous and horrifying violence by allowing the government to monopolize physical power of the citizens. This is a mistake that has been repeated throughout history, often at the cost of tens of millions of destroyed lives. Now, often tyrants will have themselves photographed with children while they are in the midst of sacrificing our rights.
Video now?
No, the slide. While they're sacrificing our rights in order to make us feel good and think that they're doing something for us. This has been attempted many times. Now, President Obama has issued 23 executive orders as part of his campaign to disarm the American people and strip them of their Second Amendment rights. These executive orders include things like turning doctors into police state snitches by ordering them to ask their patients about guns. It also orders the Centers for Disease Control to begin studying gun violence and gun ownership as if it were a disease. There will no doubt become some part of a mental health solution to disarming the public. Anyone who disagrees with the official government position will simply be labeled as mentally ill and then denied the ability to purchase or possess otherwise legal firearms. Now, you may have heard back in January the ABC News story about a 5-year-old girl who was suspended from her class for 10 days in order to have a psych eval because she brought a Hello Kitty bubblegum to school. She and her friend wanted to shoot bubbles at each other on the playground. Now, the school said it was a terrorist threat. You can look it up. It's on ABC News. Now, let me say that again. Suspended for 10 days in order to have a psych eval for playing with a toy the way it was intended to be played with. Psychological evaluation, terrorist threat. Now, it would be easy enough to write about the absurdity of America and the culture of fear that we now live in, but where this could somehow be considered a threat, is beyond me. However, in light of Obama's recent executive orders, this story takes on some added weight. Obama's executive orders have within them the very pertinent theme, the hijacking of the mental health industry through Obamacare. Now, I'm not saying that the story is an immediate example of these executive orders, but put into context, it is certainly an indicator of where the wind is blowing. While the little girl in the article was found to be, fully mentally sound and not a danger to anybody, surprise, she still has a blemish on her permanent record now. One that stopped her from being able to get into a different school, which is something that her parents, who were correctly outraged, tried to do after this ridiculous incident. No other schools would accept her because of a couple of fools decided that a bubble gun was the sign of an upcoming murder spree, and the suspension and a psych eval are now on her record. Now, under these executive orders, who's to say that this psych eval, some point later on down the line, is on her record, and it may be used to deny her the right to purchase firearms over some bizarre incident that happened when she was 5. So I was asked to comment on some of these executive orders, and I'll just go into a few of them, some of the ones that are the most egregious, but there were 23 of these executive orders, and I'll kind of describe what the White House says they are, and these descriptions are almost certainly deceptions, so I won't take them at face value because, as we know, the devil's in the details, but until we get a chance to look at the actual wording of each executive order, we won't really know what Obama is trying to pull outside of the law without Congress and in violation of the United States Constitution. So these orders also completely ignore the issue of the psychiatric drugging of children, which if you look into any mass shooting spree, almost every single one of these people that are involved have been on some kind of psychotropic drugs. But here's a list that the White House provided so far, and this is just a partial list, but issue a presidential memorandum directing the Centers for Disease Control to research the causes and prevention of gun violence. Now, what's the effect? This is a violation of a 1996 law that was passed in the wake of the Brady assault ban in 1994. Spending research money on loaded anti-gun studies not only violates this 1996 statute, but it takes away from legitimate research on legitimate disease. Now, in looking through this, the president may want to put a hold on that one until he comes to grips with what happened the last time that this was attempted under President Carter. In the 70s, President Carter's inner circle decided that they were going to push through comprehensive new federal gun control legislation. They decided the best way to grease the congressional skids was going to be to have a massive scientific study, which in the end would proclaim that gun control laws were having an effect on reducing crime. So the Carter folks handed a major gun control research grant to the University of Massachusetts and a sociology major, James Wright, and his colleagues Peter Rossi and Kathleen Daly. Now these guys spent 4 years and a lot of your tax dollars to produce the most comprehensive and critical study of gun control ever taken. In 1981, they published the results of their research, a 3-volume work titled Under the Gun. Now there's only one problem with this research. Their findings, summarized by co-author Wright, were that gun control laws do not reduce crime, surprisingly. When Rossi and Wright and Daly produced their report for the National Institute of Justice, they delivered a document that was very different from the one that they had expected to write. David Koppel, director of research of the Independence Institute and co-author of a law school book, Firearms Law and the Second Amendment,
Carefully reviewing all the existing research to date, the three scholars found no persuasive scholarly evidence that America's 20,000 gun control laws had reduced criminal violence. Funny thing about criminals is they don't care what kind of laws you pass. But among some of their findings were that the landmark 1968 Gun Control Act banning most interstate gun sales had no discernible effect on criminal acquisition of firearms from other states. The Detroit law providing mandatory sentences for felonies committed with a gun was found to have no effect on gun crime patterns. Washington, D.C.'s 1977 ban on ownership of handguns, except those already registered in the district, was not linked to any reduction in gun crime in the nation's capital. And having lived down there for several years, I can tell you that's 100% true. Polls claiming to show the large majority of the population favored more gun control were debunked as being a product of biased questions and the fact that most people had no idea of how strict gun laws already are. And the scholars frankly admitted that they had started out their research as gun control advocates but had been forced to change their minds after a careful review of the evidence. Now, another one of these executive orders addresses the unnecessary legal barriers, particularly relating to the Health Insurance and Portability and Accountability Act, that may prevent states from making information available to the background check system. Now, what's the effect of this? Electronic medical records will establish de facto gun registration directory, because all of the medical records are now going into one big electronic database. So when you go to the doctor and they start asking you about firearms, and you say yes, 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 well, that goes down in your record, and they know who has firearms. Now, here are three interesting ones. Propose a rule to give law enforcement the ability to run a full background check on an individual before returning a seized gun. Publish a letter from the ATF to federally licensed gun dealers providing guidance on how to run background checks for private sellers. And issue a presidential memorandum to require federal law enforcement to trace guns recovered from criminal investigation. Now, this would be laughable if it weren't so pathetic. This is from the same group of people who, via the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Fast and Furious program, made gun dealers walk illegal guns into Mexico, where they lost track of them and where they were ultimately used in cartel murders in Mexico and the murders of 2 U.S. Border Control agents. Nominate an ATF director. The new nominee, Todd B. Jones, was one of the brain trust behind the Fast and Furious operation. Now, Jones was personally a part of a high-ranking Department of Justice unit that first met in October of 2009 to create new DOJ policy that was going to be used to justify this gun-walking operation, Fast and Furious, and according to the House Committee of Oversight and Reform. So, again, you got somebody who's going to be this new director who's got a pretty spotty record of his own. Clarify that the Affordable Care Act does not prevent doctors from asking their patients about guns in their homes. We already talked about that a little bit. And to release a letter to healthcare providers clarifying that no federal law prohibits them from reporting threats of violence to law enforcement authorities. Now, I understand, you want to make sure that bad things don't happen, but this is what's really interesting about this particular piece of it. These are two provisions where the Obamacare law turns doctors into Stalinist snitches. Because think about it. Your doctor is violating now your privacy between you and your doctor. And you'd be entering your name into new electronic medical records database, and they would have a record of your gun ownership. Now, they will, not only will they know where your firearms are, but if you're an attorney, you can't give this information to anybody because you have attorney-client privilege. So the doctors are being turned into snitches, but a felon can say, I've got a house full of guns, and the attorney can't go and tell the sheriff or any other law enforcement agent about it. Now, that's Alice in Wonderland stuff to me. I don't know. But wait, it gets better. So after all of that, You will be glad to know that most of you are now classified as terrorists. How do you like that? Now, why do you say that, Scott? Well, the reason I say that is because a West Point think tank back in January issued a paper warning America about far-right groups, such as the Anti-Federalist movement, which supports civil activism, individual freedoms, and self-government. This report was issued on January 15th by the, quote, Combating Terrorism Center at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And it is titled, Challengers from the Sidelines, Understanding America's Violent Far Right. This center, which is part of the institution where men and women are molded into Army officers, lumps limited government activists with three movements that it identifies as racist, white supremacist, and anti-federalist, and the fundamentalist movement. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, the West Point Center typically focuses on Al-Qaeda and other Islamic extremists that are attempting to gain power in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa through violence, but now they've produced this report. But its latest study turns inward, and it paints a broad brush of people that it considers to be far right. It says that anti-federalists and those who, quote, espouse strong convictions regarding the federal government, believing it to be corrupt and tyrannical, with a natural tendency to intrude on individual, civil, and constitutional rights. Finally, they say, and they support civil activism and individual freedoms and self-government. Extremists in the anti-federalist movement direct most of their violence against the federal government and its proxies and law enforcement. I don't know about you, but I've been to a whole lot of tea parties, and I've been to a whole lot of places, I've been around a whole lot of people, and they're all very peaceful. So here's the good news. The good news is that nullification bills for federal gun control confiscation laws have been introduced in the legislatures of Alaska, Wyoming, Utah, Texas, South Carolina, Missouri, and Maine. Unfortunately, it seems that here in Maryland, many delegates that, according to Jefferson and Madison, are duty-bound to interpose or nullify unconstitutional federal legislation just don't have the stomach for it. An aide to GOP Delegate Dwyer, who introduced a bill this session that ultimately never made it out of committee, was going to nullify Section 1021 and 1022 of the NDAA. His aide told me that most delegates generally are resistant to nullification bills, even though they agree that the federal law is unconstitutional. So what the delegates are saying is that they're unwilling to do their job to protect you from unconstitutional acts by the federal government. Now, if this is how they really feel, then they should resign, or they should be fired at the next election by we the people, because we deserve a lot better than that. Now, as you heard, sheriffs are starting to nullify these pretended acts of legislation as well, and I call them pretended acts of legislation because if they are unconstitutional, they are not laws. The Utah Sheriff's Association on January 17th sent a letter to the president that said, quote, no federal official will be permitted to descend upon our constituents and take from them what the Bill of Rights, in particular the Second Amendment, has given them. We, like you, swore a solemn oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, and we are prepared to trade our lives in preservation of its traditional interpretation. Wyoming Sheriff's Association has done the same thing, and the sheriff in Big Horton County said that if a sheriff doesn't want the feds in his county, this is a quote from him, if the sheriff doesn't want the feds in his county, he has a constitutional right and power to keep them out or ask them to leave or to retain them in custody if they're trying to enforce unconstitutional laws. Now, currently, over 300 sheriffs across the nation have stated that they will not enforce or allow federal enforcement in their counties that infringe on the Second Amendment. And there's a whole lot of states, Georgia, Maine, Kentucky, Kansas, Florida, Arizona, South Carolina, Texas, of course, and even California. Now, disarmament of the populace is always the first step to deprive them of their civil rights and human rights. Without the right to bear arms, there is no free speech, there's no due process, there's no trial by jury, and there's certainly no right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure. A government monopoly on force is a government that respects no boundaries and honors no limits. Now, you saw earlier the little chart. There's a chart that I had from the Jews for the Protection of Firearms Ownership that has a big, long chart that goes through all these countries. And again, the numbers vary. It's between 170 million and 200 million people have been murdered by government after they've been disarmed. So, few people remember anymore, especially people that are under 30, the spark that ignited the American Revolution, the shot that heard around the world was gun confiscation. Sure, the American colonists had suffered under taxation without representation. They had participated in boycotts of tea and sugar and molasses, etc. And they suffered under the tyranny of illegal searches, seizures, arrest without warrant, and long detention and denial of jury trials. However, most people are unaware that the last straw, the one that broke the camel's back, was on April 19th in 1775, when the British Army was directed to march and seize the colonists' guns and powder caches at Lexington and Concord, and to arrest a pair of political dissidents named John Hancock and Samuel Adams. So, look where we are now. We have an out-of-control government where both parties routinely attempt to legislate away our God-given rights. Since 2001, we have seen the following. The Patriot Act, which violates the Fourth Amendment. The Federal Grounds Improvement Act, which allows the Secret Service to violate our First Amendment rights by preventing the right to assemble on federal property to redress grievances. The FAA Modernization and Reform Act, which is going to authorize 30,000 drones in the sky over the next 7 years, which violates the Fourth Amendment. The NDAA, which authorizes arrest without warrant, indefinite detention, and any American citizen anywhere in the world, even on U.S. soil, that the President deems to be a threat. This violates the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, Eighth, and 14th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. CISPA and SOPA, they're trying to get control of the internet again. This law is back. It's coming back into the Congress right now. Assassination. We've already heard, you heard Rand Paul's filibuster on the floor of the Senate. The President has declared the right to assassinate any American anywhere in the world that he deems to be a threat without due process, without charges. Okay. We got the federal agencies buying 2 billion rounds of .40 caliber ammunition. Now, that's enough to fight a 24-year Iraqi war. And hollow point ammunition is not allowed to be used on battlefields, by the way. And it's not used for target practice because it's too expensive. It's prohibited by the Geneva Convention. So ask yourself, why does DHS and the Social Security Administration and the Weather Service and the Forest Service need hundreds of thousands of rounds of hollow point ammunition? Why do they need mine-resistant armored vehicles like this? DHS has just purchased dozens of those. 15 congressmen want to know the answer to this question too, and they sent a letter to Janet Napolitano asking for answers, but so far DHS has refused to comply. Does anyone remember back in August of 2009 when President Obama said, we cannot continue to rely on our military in order to achieve our national security objectives that we've set? We've got to have a civilian national security force that is just as powerful and just as strong and just as well funded.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Well, it appears that DHS is that agency. Do these sound like the act of a government dedicated to peace and freedom and liberty? Article 6 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights states, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive to the good and happiness of mankind. As stated in the Declaration of Independence, we suffer from a king, a president, who has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction beyond, foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Now, Patrick Henry is well known for his famous "Give me liberty or give me death" quote. However, it is little known that he also said this in the same speech. It is natural for men to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against the painful truth and to listen to the song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, having ears, hear not, for the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth and to know the worst and to prepare for it. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings, presidents resort. I ask gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array if its purpose is not to force us into submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Does the government have any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over here to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry has been so long forging. So clearly we're seeing an usurpation of our natural rights. So we have a right to expect that the people that we elect to represent us uphold their oath of office and to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We have a right to expect our congressmen, senators, state delegates, and sheriff to defend our natural rights. Now, when you guys leave here tonight, your mission is threefold. Call and write your congressman and ask him or her to uphold his oath of office, to defend your natural right to self-defense. And I have, for anybody that wants it, I got everybody's contact information here. Call and write your state delegate and state senator and ask them to introduce nullification legislation to nullify federal legislation or executive orders which would further infringe on our Second Amendment rights, and to vote no on HB 294 and SB 291. And to read the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. And I have copies of the Constitution that has the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions in it right here. So I'll leave you with some final thoughts from Thomas Jefferson. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. And what country can preserve its liberties if rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? So to those who would disarm the American people and deny us our natural rights as free men and women, to keep and bear arms, I have but 4 words. Come and take it. Resist.
And this is why our sheriff is so important, because if this stuff comes down the pike, we need folks like Sheriff Christopher. We're going to close tonight with some words from Dave Pritchett. He's going to give us a Liberty update.
We were going to talk about some of the successes we had in the legislative session down in Annapolis, but we don't have time for all that. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to put out an appeal to people, all right? If you all remember this last presidential process that we went through on the Republican side, okay? Think back. All different candidates had their moment in the sun for a week or two. Whether it was Michelle Bachmann or Herman Cain or Rick Perry or Santorum or Gingrich, they all had a period there where they got some positive press and their campaigns got a little surge. Remember, everybody remember that? Well, when they met at the Tampa Convention, the people that run the Republican Party decided they wanted to clamp down on that process and not allow that to happen anymore. So what they did, they put a whole new series of rules in Tampa, all right? They want to halve the debates. Okay? They want to reduce the number of caucuses, okay? And proportional primaries. You all know what a proportional primary is, right? That's what we don't have in Maryland. We have winner take all. So consequently, we don't get any candidates come to Maryland because if they invest time here, they're not going to get anything out of it. This is an establishment Republican candidate state. Okay? So the party put these new rules in down at Tampa. All right? They want to get control back over the process. All right? So, tremendous controversy around this. Different states are fighting now to change the rules back to pre-Tampa. All right? So that people have a chance in the caucus states and all the different other forms to have their say. So what happened is we just had a coup here in Maryland, the Republican Party. And Diane Waterman, who is the chairman, well, let's step up a minute. Wayne Mooney had a vote. Nicolene Ambrose became the person from Maryland that was going to be on the Rules Committee. And she's a person that's in favor of rolling back these pre-Tampa rules. Okay? Or back to the pre-Tampa rules. So, Wayne Mooney resigned. Alex Mooney, yes, excuse me. Resigned, put in his resignation. Diana Waterman became temporary chair. Even though all the paperwork was submitted and accepted by the RNC, she withdrew Nicolene Ambrose's nomination, and she's put Louis Pope in that position, who was one of the main water carriers for the Republican Party establishment down at Tampa, and was thanked on the floor of the convention by John Sununu through helping to ram through these changes. These changes that are going to stomp on the grassroots of the party. So this is what I have to say to people. I want you to join me on April 19th. We're going to have a hospitality suite there, and we're going to have buttons on that say, "I stand with Nicolene Ambrose." And this is going to come up at the convention the following day. All right? And what is April 19th? April 19th is the 238th anniversary of the day that Patrick Henry, 238th anniversary of the day that Paul Revere took his life in his hands and rode to warn John Hancock and Samuel Adams that the British troops are on their way to arrest them. And there was a battle of Lexington and Concord, whereas the Concord Bridge and Lexington Green, those people took on the British Army. They risked everything against overwhelming numbers. And we're going to have this hospitality suite there. I'm asking people to join me and to stand up and say to the party establishment, that the grassroots means something, okay? That you can't change the process. What they want to front load, think about this, they want to front load winner take all primaries. So they want states like Florida that has multiple media markets to be at the very front of the process. So that what happens? Only the candidate, the establishment candidate with the money can make a run at this thing. Okay? So what we've done, what the way the process was everything was interworked with proportional and caucus states, so that just like happened in the last cycle, you know, the Herman Cains and the Rick Perrys of the world got their chance to make their point, get their platform heard, and have a shot at running for the nomination of the president of the party. The nomination. So I want people to join us on April 19th. down at the convention, and we got to make it known to the party that we're not going to tolerate this. Okay? That they can't, the establishment just can't, what they're attempting to do is ride over the Liberty wing of the party, the Tea Party wing of the party, and the Christian conservative wing of the party, and they just want the establishment Republicans to have a shot here. So I hope everybody will join me. This thing's at Timonium. Okay? It's going to be at the Marriott Crown Plaza in Timonium. That's at 83 and Shawan Road. And we need people there to stand up against the establishment and to keep ourselves having a chance at having somebody that will really be a conservative candidate for president. And, you know, the Mitt Romneys and the John McCains of the world, the Bob Doles, we've been through all that. We need somebody that's got real conservative values to be the nominee of the party in 2016, or we're going down to defeat again. Thank you.
We will post that information for everybody on our website, www.hartfordliberty.org. Go to our website, and we'll also get an email out to all the Campaign for Liberty folks on our email list. Thanks for coming, guys. We'll see you next week.